Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and I am very excited for this one as at long last we are checking out one of the new breed of 4K 240Hz QD-OLED monitors in the form of the MSI MPG 321URX. Using a 3rd gen QD-OLED panel from Samsung, this monitor promises near instant response times, top-notch motion clarity, and of course fantastic HDR support. Without further ado then, let's dive in and find out exactly how good this monitor really is. So then, if you missed the news, back at CES 2024, we got the first wave of announcements of monitors using Samsung's new 3rd gen QD-OLED panel, specifically the 4K 32-inch 240Hz variant, as we see here with the MSI MPG 321URX. It is safe to say that the combination of OLED, 4K and 240Hz has a lot of people excited, myself included. So in today's review we have a whole bunch of panel tests to show you, as well as a look at response times, HDR, the real world gaming experience and much more. Kicking off with the design of the MSI MPG 321URX though, if you've seen any of MSI's other monitors released over the last year or two, then you will be familiar with what's on offer here. It's an almost entirely matte black affair with a bezel-less design on the front, while we do see a subtle grey chin that measures in under 20mm thick. The rear of the monitor is home to the MSI Dragon logo and a small RGB zone above the stand, though it is very small and obviously not visible from the front. I do appreciate though that MSI is keeping the square-ish stand foot instead of a large V-shaped foot as we typically see. That said, the stand and the rear of the monitor do feel perhaps just a touch plasticky considering the price of this screen, but it wasn't a problem for me once it was set up on my desk. Back to the stand though, this does offer a good array of ergonomic adjustments, including height adjust up to 110mm. We get 30 degrees of swivel both left and right. There's tilt from 5 degrees downwards to 15 degrees upwards, while there's also 10 degrees of pivot in both directions. VESA 100x100 mounts are also supported if you want to attach a third-party stand or monitor arm. As for the port selection on offer, MSI has opted for one DisplayPort 1.4a, two HDMI 2.1, which is great to see, and there's also a USB-C that supports DP alt mode along with 90 watts of power delivery. A Type B upstream then feeds two USB Type A downstream ports, and KVM functionality is supported. Positioned centrally on the rear of the screen, we also find a small joystick used to navigate the OSD, and this is flanked by two buttons. One a simple power button, but the other can be customized, which can be configured using MSI's gaming intelligence software. Speaking of the OSD then, this uses the same OSD menu system as we have come to expect from MSI, and I really don't have any real complaints here. It's very quick to navigate using the joystick, things are sensibly laid out, and it is a very well featured selection too, with all the gamer specific options we have come to expect, as well as customizable white balance, an sRGB emulation mode, and so on. You can also install MSI's Gaming Intelligence app if you want to control all of the monitor's functions directly from your Windows desktop. It offers all of the same options in the OSD. The only slight quirk for me was that you can't actually resize the window, which is slightly annoying, but you can also use the software to update the firmware, which is always a good inclusion.
Camera action, we ready to roll. Alright, places, everybody, let's put on a good show. You're talking, you got the wrong living legend, lethal weapon, mastermind, big time.
That's going to do it then for our quick look at the design of the monitor, and now we're going to move on to testing. As a reminder, here we are using our updated testing methodology where we make use of Portrait Display's Kalman Ultimate software, and if you want to read more about that, you can head over to our website at kitguru.net. Starting out our testing though with brightness and contrast, it's worth noting that we did select the user mode for this test. Out of the box, the MPG 321URX defaults to the Eco mode, which does cap brightness slightly lower than what can be achieved with the user mode. Still, a minimum brightness of just 30 nits is a good result, and a full screen peak of 243 nits is about expected for a QD-OLED monitor. Being OLED, we of course get perfect black levels too, resulting in effectively infinite contrast. It's also good to see that luminance is very steady regardless of the window size, or APL. Some monitors will show a noticeable drop off in brightness as the window size gets bigger, but that is not the case for the 321 URX, as it's a very uniform experience. As for Gamut, being a QD-OLED monitor, we get a very wide gamut from the 321 URX, well exceeding the sRGB space and delivering 98.9% coverage of DCI-P3 alongside 96.5% reporting of the Adobe RGB color space, and Rec 2020 coverage is also decent, hitting 77.9%. Moving on to grayscale testing, out of the box the 321 URX does deliver decent results with an average Delta E 2000 of 2.75. My sample does have a slightly warm average correlated color temperature, or CCT, of 6064K, and that is due to the red channel being slightly raised while the blue channel is slightly low. Gamma tracking is generally fine too, averaging almost 2.2, though it is slightly too low in the brighter shades. Thankfully though, there is user adjustable white balance available on the 321 URX, and I got significantly improved results by lowering the red balance down from 100 to 98. That resulted in an average Delta E 2000 of just 1.29, which is fantastic, alongside an improved average CCT of 6605K. In terms of saturation then, given just how wide the monitor's gamut is, we do see quite a bit of oversaturation relative to the sRGB space. Things do look better relative to the DCI-P3 color space, however, with an average Delta E 2000 of 2.11, which is good but not mind-blowing. As expected, those high levels of oversaturation means that color accuracy relative to sRGB is pretty poor, with an average Delta E 2000 of 4.82. Once again, if we compare to the DCI-P3 space instead, the results do improve with a new Delta E 2000 of 2.55. The MPG 321 URX does also feature an sRGB emulation mode, and this does a good job at clamping the gamut, as we can see here. This mode doesn't correct the slightly warm color balance we saw in the out-of-the-box settings, but it does actually improve gamma tracking slightly, aside from that one dip near the right-hand side of the curve. Saturation accuracy is also improved too, with an average Delta E 2000 of 1.58 compared to 3.98 using the monitor's default mode. Color accuracy is also impressively good using this sRGB mode, with an average Delta E of just 1.45, so we can definitely recommend using this mode. It's one of the most accurate I have tested. Of course, I also put the 321 URX through a full calibration using CalMan Ultimate. This delivered almost flawless grayscale and gamma tracking, with an average Delta E of our saturation sweeps dropping to just 0.33, and of course, color accuracy also improved tremendously with an average Delta E of 0.47, so it is worth doing if you have the tools and need as accurate an image as possible. Just before moving on, it also should go without saying that viewing angles are exceptional as we'd expect from an OLED, with basically no drop off in vibrance or saturation when viewed from the side. Just before we move on to our gaming experience then, there are just a few other factors that you might want to consider when thinking about purchasing one of these monitors. The first is going to be the screen coating, which is typical of QD-OLEDs, as it's that sort of same semi-gloss approach. As has been well documented now, this can result in the perception of raised black levels, especially if you use the monitor in a brighter environment, and this isn't something that's as much of an issue with WOLED panels. That said, if, like me, you tend to do most of your gaming in a dimmer environment, then it's really not an issue and you will get those perfect black levels. This is just something to point out, as it really does depend on your use case and your environment. The same can also be said for text fringing, which was a particular issue for previous QD-OLED monitors, especially the first gen panels, as Samsung did actually improve the sub-pixel layout for its second and third gen QD-OLED panels. That improvement, coupled with the increased pixel density of 4K, means that fringing here is really a non-issue in my opinion, and I'd honestly be really happy to use this monitor all day doing text-heavy work without a problem. The final thing to mention then is of course going to be burn-in. Any OLED monitor could be at risk of developing permanent burn-in, but smart usage can help avoid this, and credit to MSI, they do have an absolute ton of OLED care features, all designed at mitigating the risk of burn-in. These include pixel shift, panel protect, and then a whole bunch of new detection features, which are all designed to identify static elements on screen and reduce their brightness. As you can see here, these settings do work pretty effectively. If you leave your monitor on for just a couple of minutes, they will start to automatically dim. MSI also offers a 3-year warranty with burn-in protection for extra peace of mind, and that is always great to see.
If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out booleys.co.uk.
It's time to move on and talk about response times though, and we're using the open source response time tool as developed by Tech Team GB. Honestly, I'm going to be very quick here as there isn't a whole lot to say. We see very fast response times across the board regardless of the refresh rate used, and this is of course typical of an OLED monitor. Of course, that doesn't mean that motion clarity is the same at different refresh rates, and this is due to the sample and hold nature of OLED screens. The higher the refresh rate, the less time each frame is displayed, the clearer the image looks. As we can see here from this Blurbusters UFO image, 240Hz looks absolutely fantastic and is a noticeable step up in motion clarity from even a 120Hz OLED display. As for all of our testing then means for real world gaming, I have to say using the MPG 321 URX has been like nothing else I have ever tried. It may sound obvious, but the combination of the lucidly sharp 4K resolution alongside the motion clarity you get from this 240Hz OLED really is breathtaking. I remember firing up Horizon Forbidden West for the first time, for instance, and watching the intro sequence was just wow. Everything looks so clear and pristine, and of course you get the perfect contrast ratio from the OLED technology as well. It just works really well for a lot of different games too. It almost doesn't matter what kind of games you play. You can be playing fast-paced shooters, for instance, and admittedly the 32-inch screen size is considered way too big by esports standards, but the motion clarity and responsiveness is absolutely great for clicking heads or driving fast cars. Even when dialing it down and playing something slow and chill, you still benefit hugely from the native contrast ratio and vibrant colours due to the QD-OLED panel. It may sound a little bit silly, but honestly, using this monitor has genuinely made me want to play more games as the experience it delivers is so enjoyable. Things only get better when enabling HDR as well. Now, out of the box, the 321 URX defaults to the True Black 400 mode when HDR is enabled, and this limits brightness in HDR mode to about 460 nits, which is sustained up to a 10% APL, after which the brightness does slowly drop off until it hits a full screen figure of 263 nits. There is, however, a peak 1000 nit mode too, which does what it says on the tin. It delivers a peak of 1000 nits for the 1% and 2% APLs before dropping off as the window size increases. Apart from brightness though, the difference between these two modes is quite hard to spot. The RGB balance is very similar, as is the grayscale delta E. There is just a tiny difference in the EOTF tracking, with the HDR peak 1000 mode rolling off just slightly early compared to the True Black 400 mode, but both are generally very accurate and don't pose any headaches for use with HDR content. Likewise, colour accuracy with HDR enabled is very similar between the two modes. Each deliver delta E's around 2.2 to 2.4. The biggest offenders, of course, are the 100% cyan and 100% green channels, which the monitor just can't display accurately due to its sub 100% coverage of the Rec 2020 colour space. Gaming with HDR enabled as well is as good as you'd expect, thanks to OLED's inherent advantages here, as we get per pixel dimming, so there's no blooming or haloing, and the perfect contrast ratio that OLED can offer creates a hugely immersive experience. That, plus the very solid job MSI has done with the HDR configuration, means that if a game supported it, I did generally play with HDR enabled, with the 1000 nit peak mode of course being my preference. So that is really going to do it for this review of the MSI MPG 321 URX, and safe to say it is a very, very good gaming monitor. Of course, I was coming into this review expecting to be impressed, but still, the combination of the 4K resolution, 240Hz refresh rate, plus all the benefits that OLED can bring, makes for an incredibly impressive gaming experience. You can't just slap a sticker on a QD-OLED panel from Samsung though and call it job done. There is still work to be done to fine-tune the user experience, and MSI has done a great job here in my opinion. For starters, they have an excellent range of anti-burn-in features alongside a 3-year warranty that does include burn-in protection, which I always love to see. Factory calibration is also solid, particularly when using the sRGB mode, which is the most accurate I have tested to date, and I also like their OSD system and the desktop app, which both offer a ton of options to adjust. In terms of criticisms then, I honestly only really have one, and that comes down to the just slightly plasticky build quality of the stand and the rear of the monitor. A lot of other monitors I test around this price point do come with a full metal stand, which I think would help, but like I already said in the review, once this screen is on your desk, it's really not going anywhere, so I can't be too critical in this regard. The only other thing to point out is that UK buyers are unfortunately definitely getting the short end of the stick when it comes to pricing, as this screen is currently up for pre-order for £1,299 here in the UK, while in the US it's actually up for pre-order for $949, which is quite a significant difference and not something I ever like to see being a Brit myself. However, we knew that a monitor like this was never going to come cheap, and as has been the way in the PC gaming market for absolute donkey's years, if you want the best of the best, you always have to be prepared to pay for it, and I certainly think the MSI MPG 321URX is well worth paying a premium for. That is going to do it for this video though guys, so if you liked it, please do toss me a thumbs up, and as always, let me know your thoughts on this monitor down in the comments below. Please do subscribe if you haven't already and ding that notification bell so you don't miss when we upload a new video. And if you want to carry on the conversation with us, you can find an invite link to our Discord server down in the description. While there, you'll also find a link to our merch store where you can pick up a cool t-shirt like the ones you see on screen right now. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can even consider backing us on Patreon. That's it for this one though guys. I'm Dominic for Kit Guru, and I'll see you in the next video.